Welcome to IGN Summer of Gaming, presented by FX's Alien Earth, premiering August 12th on FX and Hulu. I'm Nick Limon, and joining me to talk all about the Konami Press Start is Matt Kim.
Hello.
And, of course, John Davison. John?
Hello. How you doing?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Good.
Guys, we just got out of the Konami Press Start, and arguably one of the biggest announcements that Konami had is the Bloober remake of the original Silent Hill. So, temperature check. How are we feeling about it? Matt Kim, you go first.
Yeah, I mean, even though it was only the logo and they didn't show any gameplay or any stills from it, I'm still super excited. I love the original Silent Hill, and I'm really stoked that they are going back, because that one is, that one's older than Silent Hill 2, and when it's on the original PlayStation 1, it's more dated, and so I'm very excited to see how they're going to modernize it.
I mean, was it 1999 or something? The first one, 26-year-old game. I mean, there's a lot that they can modernize. I think this game, more than the others, I think, taps into what Bloober are actually pretty good at, right? So Bloober, I think, are much better at the sort of like messing with your head horror than they are at the monster horror, honestly. And I think, when you think about some of their previous games, like when they get into kind of the psychological trauma stuff, and they really kind of the sort of like things that get in your head. And the first Silent Hill was really all about that, and I think this kind of really taps into what their skills are, because a lot of the scares in this game were kind of things in the shadows and things in the background, and it was stuff, because of the technical limitations of the PlayStation at the time, they couldn't throw a lot of stuff at you, so it was stuff jumping out of the fog and stuff jumping out of the shadows, and I think that actually, it kind of helps. I have really fond memories of this game. I can remember, like, sat on my living room floor, like, the original PlayStation had a wired controller,
like
remember?
3 feet long.
Right, it was only 3 feet long, so you had to sit really near the television. And I just, I think, having the opportunity to play this again in a decent engine, I assume they're going to run it in Unreal Engine 5, so it's going to look gorgeous. I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, and just going back to kind of the original Silent Hill, I think the thing that made that one stand out over something like Resident Evil is the general atmosphere and the different type of horror that it was going for, whereas Resident Evil is very jump scary and almost semi-action to some extent with RE1 and RE2, of course. You had your Hideki Kamiya working on Resident Evil 2 to make it more action-oriented. Silent Hill always set itself apart by being more psychological and more trying to get under your skin and build a slow sense of dread. And I think, when you look at Bloober's track record for development in horror, it's kind of hit or miss for me. So how do we feel about Bloober once again taking the reins of this remake?
Yeah, no, I think I was in that camp where, I've enjoyed Bloober games in the past, but when they were announced as a dev team for Silent Hill 2, I had some reservations, I think that's mostly because I love Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill as a franchise overall, and I have a hard time thinking any studio can do a really good job remaking the original. But I thought Bloober did a really good job with the remake. I had a great time playing it again on the PS5, and it looked great, it felt great, and I think they captured tonally what I loved about the original so well, and so I'm really excited for them to try. And I think we've been talking about it, but the original Silent Hill 1 has a different tone than Silent Hill 2.
Yeah. Very much so, yeah.
So I'm curious how they're going to tackle this. Like, it's going to be a new challenge for them, but I think they can do it.
Let's get a little nitty gritty though. What specifically about Bloober's Silent Hill 2 remake do you think you appreciated the most? And then I'm coming to you next, John, so be ready.
All right.
I think, and this is sort of my point about Silent Hill in general, is I think the main thing about that compared to like Resident Evil is it's about what they don't do versus what they do. Yeah. There were times where you would just go through a dark hallway in Silent Hill and nothing appears at you, but you're still terrified anyways. And I think that's what Bloober was able to like excel at with the remake. Like, they were able to hold back and like keep their powder dry and like hit you with the gut punch for maximum scares. And then like know when to like reel it in and just let you like stew in your fear. And I'm excited for them to try that again with Silent Hill 1.
Yeah, they did a really good job of zagging when you thought that they were going to zip or whatever, just because, the original game has been played to death at this point. So a lot of the fake outs they did, kind of recontextualizing and redoing the first encounter that you have with some of the creatures in the Silent Hill 2 remake was like pretty impressive, because it catches you off guard for both longtime fans and first-time players. So for first-time players, it's still creepy as hell, but if you are a veteran of Silent Hill 2, you're just constantly on your toes. But John, let's get to you.
I think Bloober's good. The slower they go, the better they are. I think they've had some duds in their past, and I think, the medium I didn't think was great. I quite enjoyed the Observer, the Rutger Hauer one.
Yeah, Observer
The
was
Cyberpunk
great.
one, and I think one of the things that made that stand out was because the pace of it was actually very slow and very methodical. And I think Silent Hill is best, well, all the Silent Hill games, but I think Silent Hill 2 in particular is best when you kind of play it slowly. Like, if you try and run through that game and you rush it, you kind of lose a lot of the atmosphere and you lose a lot of what's really going on. And, like, Bloober did a really good job of kind of forcing you to slow down, because that's when the fear kind of kicks in. And they kind of made it so that you had to kind of like really take your time and really appreciate what was happening. And I think that's kind of that, and then the fact that they really are good at the psychological side of things. I think they're much better at the psychological horror than they are monster horror or gore horror, or like, I mean, there are many different flavors of horror, and I think particularly over this summer, like, we've seen a lot of games announced that do lots of different types of horror. And I think Silent Hill in particular is always at its best when it is actually not doing anything. You know, right? When it is all in your head and you are just expecting something to happen. And I think all the way back since the original PlayStation game, the best moments were you walk into a room and you're just waiting for something to happen, and then it doesn't.
Mm-hmm. And going back to, we had already talked about how Silent Hill is at its best when it is leaning into the atmospheric and psychological, which is a thing that Bloober's very good at, but also just wearing its influences on its sleeve and not being afraid of showing things that maybe some audience members have seen. Thinking specifically of stuff like Jacob's Ladder. But the thing that impressed me most about Bloober's Silent Hill 2 remake was two things. I didn't think that they would be able to extrapolate a 5 to 7 hour experience on the original PS2 into a game that I had been told before I played it was about 15 to 20 hours long. So I was like, how are they going to do that? But it never felt like it overstayed its welcome. No. Each single set piece in the game, each location felt like it never overstayed its welcome. I felt like I was constantly learning more about the game. It recontextualizes the game in some pretty meaningful ways. And without diving into too much specifics, I think it does a lot what I think my favorite remakes are doing these years is kind of not remaking the game, but building on what came before. I'm thinking of stuff that's like Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, where it is acknowledging the legacy of the original game and not taking it away, telling you this still exists, but here's something a little extra for all the fans. And I really appreciate that. But let's get back to the Silent Hill 1 remake now. Obviously, the PlayStation 1 game is pretty old, as we've discussed now, and I think in 2025, PS1 aesthetics in general are becoming popular again. We're seeing a lot of...
I don't understand why. I really don't understand
why.
It's cool,
man. See, I think that
you think it's cool?
It's cool. It's nostalgia at this point. So I gotta ask, what do we think that Bloober can do to, I guess, modernize the original Silent Hill? Let's start with you, Matt.
Yeah. So I think this kind of goes back to what Bloober did so well with Silent Hill 2, is that these older games, I think level design was a big challenge for, not challenge, but level design was something that was still being figured out, I think, by developers around that era. There was a lot of like frustrating, maze-like levels where at some point you would hit dead ends and it would just get like really annoying, like the apartment complex in Silent Hill 2, for example. And Silent Hill 1 also has that, and I thought Bloober did a really good job of cutting out certain levels where it was like, no, we're not going to remake this apartment in its full because the original was kind of bad to
It's
play.
supposed to drive you insane, Matt.
Well, I don't know, but the original one also has that kind of like level design where you're just like, actually, I kind of just want this to be over with.
Yes.
And so I'm excited to see, how they sort of like edit some of the parts of the original that didn't work and change up some of the things. Because I thought the changes that they made were really successful. I thought their version of the apartments were much better in Silent Hill 2 than the original. And I can think of some levels in Silent Hill 1 that I'm kind of excited to see that kind of change too.
It's more legible all around.
Yeah.
But what do you
think,
think,
the thing
John?
that and I think they did this in 2, but I think they're going to need to do it more in 1 is, using an engine like Unreal Engine 5, they have to use light. Right, like Silent Hill is really a game all about light and shadow, and I mean the entire game you have that flashlight on your chest, and it was a function of the technical limitation of the PlayStation, but it fed into kind of the horror and how claustrophobic that game felt. Remember, all the rooms in that game were tiny, and like every environment was tiny, and it felt cramped, and it was dark, and everything was lit by that flashlight. And I think one of the things that they can really do to kind of like modernize it and make it feel really contemporary is everything that they do with the lighting in this game is really gonna, I think is really what's gonna make it stand out, because that is really, I think, a big part of the personality of Silent, because it's not just the fog, and it's not just it is really how kind of like dark and oppressive and cramped it felt.
It's oppressive.
It is an oppressive environment. It is like the environment is as much a part of. It is a character in the game. It is a part of the trauma of playing the game, right? Is that you constantly feel like it is closing in on you all the time, and they have to maintain that. I think if they make it feel too big, or they open up these environments, you're going to lose some of the drama of the game.
Nope, complete. I mean, we've already seen Bloober do a good job of showcasing lighting with the Silent Hill 2 remake. I'm thinking specifically of the scene where you step into the hospital for the first time in the remake, and you're there as the sun is setting, and it's just this idyllic, beautiful location that over time, as the sun begins to set, starts to distort and warp the environment you're in. I couldn't think of just a better showcase of UE5, despite the stutter of the game, but just the lighting engine and the ray trace lighting and the shadows, all that stuff looked gorgeous. But I'm optimistic ultimately about Bloober remaking the original game, but my concern lies with the remakes of games that were designed with constraints in mind. Yeah. I'm thinking specifically of the original Metal Gear Solid, then getting remade as the Twin Snakes. Adding the first-person perspective to the original Metal Gear Solid simply made that game too easy. Shadow of the Colossus, I think, also had on the original PS2, was limited by its frame rate and the PS2's processing power, but I think that helped kind of add volumetric fog in a way that made the environment feel more mysterious. So I'm just a little concerned at when you are given the tools and the toy chest that are UE5, how that kind of breaks you free from the design constraints that you originally.
Silent Hill was entirely built around the limitations of the PlayStation. I mean, like, a lot of the design choices made in it were because there were things they wanted to do that the PlayStation could not do.
Exactly.
And I think that is but I think that it's that tightness and that claustrophobia that, I mean, like, we saw some of the footage, like there's that room when you walk into with the altar and it's lit by candles.
Yes.
And like that in the remake has to feel like a cramped little room that you're crawling into. It can't feel like a big sort of like a big environment it can't because they can now. It has to hold on to kind of that stuff that made the original feel the way it did, because this game was all about feel.
Yeah, and it's not like in Silent Hill 2, the remake, like that was also still a claustrophobic game. Like there are entire levels where, like the prison, where you're just like feeling like, oh, I'm trapped in here and I want to get out as quickly as possible. It's
horrible feeling.
It's stressful. Like you can still do it, and then you at the same time you can expand around it. Like in the original Silent Hill 1, you can definitely feel the edges of the game, and so I'm very excited. And Silent Hill is supposed to be a big little town, and you're supposed to feel that you are trapped in this endless sort of abyss, and I think that they can bring that to the original one, the remake of the original one as well.
Well, I think I speak for all of us when I say I cannot wait to see what Bloober has in store for this remake. And honestly, kudos to Konami for greenlighting this, because I think this is a thing that the fans have wanted for a minute, and I'm glad that we're finally getting it. But apart from this, for everything else that was announced at the Konami Press Start, we're also talking about Metal Gear Solid Delta, Silent Hill F, and also grading everything that we saw at the Konami Press Start. But for more on all things Summer of Gaming, you know where to keep it, right here on IGN.